council members of the committee. And this is really a working meeting that we give some direction on some of the optional items. And so I'm going to turn things over to Jim or David, whoever wants to lead us through the agenda and through all of the items. When we get down to the bottom about sod turning and a few things like that, I'll jump back in then. But for the rest of it, we just want to go through it step by step. I have opinions, obviously, on every one of the optional items, but I would like the committee to have the first say before we make any final decision. So, Jim, do you want to take it over? Or?
Sure, I can start us off, give you the high-level overview. We have the tender results in from D Grant as well. Staff have been working on looking at the FF&E and making adjustments on that end. The total cost of the project comes out to $34,700,000. And that includes the various separate price allowances and alternate prices. In December, we got confirmation on funding from the province, and that funding was good news. We're going to be receiving a per diem of $21.28. That's been confirmed, and that works out to the equivalent of $1.9 million of funding. In addition, there's the potential to get up to $2.5 million in a development grant. And the details of that are still unknown. So for this analysis, what staff included was just 40%, which I don't think we should have any issue with achieving given the amount of investment that we're putting into this project. In sum, between what was approved previously by council and the incremental funding from the province, we have $36.7 million. That leaves us with excess money of $1.4 million. And with that, I'll turn it over to David Heinz and D Grant to go through the details of the tenders and the alternate pricing.
Not to jump too far ahead, we have a review of the July 28, 2020 steering committee meeting minutes. They were circulated with the package. Were there any questions or comments, or do we move to item 2? Hearing no questions or comments, we'll infer that that means they're approved.
We should probably have a mover and a seconder.
So moved, Bob.
Have a second.
All in favor on the steering committee? Thank you. Thanks for keeping the order appropriate, Jim. I'll let Steve Willis from D Grant present the items under 2.1, 2, and 3, which is the subtrade bid package summary, the construction budget, and any discussion that anyone has about the form of contract that will be signed, is already signed, will be updated. So after amounts are approved. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Do I have permission to share my screen and the budget here?
Yes, go ahead.
My apologies. Everyone see that?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm having a...
There it is.
There it is. Okay, thank you.
Can you enlarge the screen, Steve? Because it's really fine.
Certainly can. This is a 6-page construction budget. The first page that we see here is the summary page. I'll just quickly go through the items on the summary page, and then we can scroll through the packages afterwards. Item 1 here is the allowance summary, and again, there is a breakdown of what that entails that we will get to. General conditions, bonding and insurance, the value identified for that, the meat and potatoes, the sub-trade tenders and supplier tenders.
Steve, I'm thinking a little further zoom would be helpful.
Okay. Is that?
That works for me now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then continuing on with values for temporary hoarding, partitions, cutting, patching, remedial of the existing work, and then rough carpentry items and miscellaneous items. That's essentially a scope gap where the items that may not have been picked up by sub-trade packages, so an allowance carried for that. Moving forward, construction contingency allowance of 5% of the value. We have carried a small escalation allowance for non-tendered items, given the duration of the overall project. And then our D grants construction management fee from spring of 2019. And then the separate and alternative prices that I believe would be discussed today. Would we like to start with these items?
Steve, it's Tom Marks. I got a question on separate pricing roof repair replace.
Okay.
Is the roof in bad shape?
Our understanding is yes, based on the report that was received. So there's still a scope of work to be. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I get you guys, just because we're gonna have to go through each one of these,
Okay,
can
fine.
we use this like an agenda and just start with separate price number 1 and walk our way through and give them clear direction on any parameters we're going to put around and whether it's even in or out. That'll be probably the easiest way to control all of these items and get us to the bottom line. So Steve, if you want to start with the first one, some of them have alternate pricing that overlap, and you're more aware of that than anybody. So let's kind of clear everything up about the chapel ceiling and lighting, then move to the next item and clear everything up on that. Okay?
Certainly, yes. Thank you. Separate price number 1 is the chapel ceiling replacement and lighting. The various sub-trades for that scope of work as identified as $88,800. That is replacement of the ceiling and lighting within the chapel.
Okay, and just to set the tone, I would like to hear from every county council member of this committee on each of these items, because we have the choice of either taking them out and setting them aside, or we have the choice of modifying them. We have the choice of putting some conditions around them and leaving them in. The bottom line is the money that we're giving back to the county in the budget, we can accommodate all of these things, but that doesn't mean that they've been approved until you approve them today. So if we want to start maybe with the warden and then Dave and then Mary, and each time we'll do that with each one.
Bob, if I could just provide 30-second context.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to have that happen.
Separate prices 1, 2, and 3 were intended to be in the original design scope, but when we were in the middle of the design process and looking at budget, when we implemented the 10% escalation allowance, we took these out of the base scope. So really these first 3 were always intended, if budget allowed, to include them. Thank you.
Okay, so if we want to start with Dave, what's your feeling on putting back in the chapel ceiling and lighting?
Well, in my opinion, you either do it now or you do it later, but it's got to be done. So certainly 1, 2, and 3, I'm all in favor of.
Okay, and Mary?
I do have a question, Bob. Um, what is wrong with the ceiling in the chapel? I'm sorry, maybe I missed that, but what needs to be replaced? Is it leaking or what's the problem there?
The existing dining room is now going to be the new chapel. And so the ceiling is appropriate for an old dining room, but not really appropriate for a new chapel. So that's why we could, if budget didn't allow, could live without it, but you really do want something that's more suitable for chapel.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to have a refresher on that one. I'd forgotten. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think that's good to, now that I know the inside track on that one.
Okay, Mary, while we're here, Dave kind of started off, he's okay for both 1, 2, and 3. Are you okay for all 3?
The millwork, is that a necessity? It's more to look nice, isn't it? There's no real advantage otherwise of that, is there?
The existing chapel is, as a part of the design, anticipated to be the gift shop, and presently the room is just an empty space. To be able to display similar to Elgin Manor, we need to add in some millwork. Right now, we just have a $50,000 cash allowance that will be priced out by the millwork trade. There is a design in process should you want to see what that entails, but it's a reasonably modest cabinets for displaying what will be sold in there.
Okay, thank you. If that's the case, then I'm in favor of that. And the number 3, I'm definitely in favor of that. I know we had quite a conversation about that back a few months ago, and I'm totally in favor of number 3.
Thanks, Mary. And Mr. Warden?
I'm fine. Yes.
Okay, Steve, that gets us through the first 3. They are approved as presented and will stay in. We can move to item number 4, which is an optional, but I'll let you explain that.
Okay, thank you. Separate price number 4 is a moisture reduction barrier. That is a product that is applied to the new slab of the Phase 1 addition. It's certainly it's to do with maintaining schedule requirements. With new concrete slabs, often the moisture content is above that's acceptable with a sheet goods or sheet vinyl manufacturer. So this system can be applied so that we can continue on with the moisture with the sheet vinyl installation at that time. It's certainly not something that is we won't know until the slab is poured if this will be required, but it's a value that we asked from the subtrades at this time.
Okay, and just before I start around the table on that particular item, basically, if we leave it in, you will not spend the money unless you're forced to spend the money.
That is correct.
Okay,
And
I'll start with Dave again.
Yeah, if this is a decision that's made after it's poured, I'm going to have to rely on staff to say yes, it's required, it's yes or it's not. So basically, I'm going to have to put it in their hands.
Okay, and Mary.
I agree with Dave.
Okay, and Mr. Warden.
For sure. Yep. We'll have to rely on expertise. I haven't got it.
Okay, we'll leave that one in. Next item is the existing roof repair and replacement. And I know there are some questions about that, but I'm just going to start in the same order again, Dave.
Well, we want to have a building that we're proud of. And, whenever you're doing your renovation, do you do half of your roof or you do the whole roof? So certainly, I think I'd be in favor of this. We want to have something that looks like it's brand new.
Okay, and Mary.
I again agree with Dave. The point is not even the looks of it, but if there's a problem with that roof and it's leaking or there's a potential for it to leak, we certainly don't want that to happen. So I agree that it should be replaced or repaired, whatever the case may be.
Okay, and Mr. Warden, I think you were around when the last roof was put on. You may have a comment.
Yes, I was on county council from 06 to 10, and Dave, you were as well. We put that roof on there, and at the time, it was pitched as a permanent roof. I remember because the same company, we put it on our church. I have a pickup out there that's older than this roof, and if it's not standing up, I guess I'm concerned about that because there was a lifetime warranty, and I realize that lifetime warranty, you get the fine print, but I think maybe we need to get the fine print out and see what's wrong with that roof. But it was pitched as a permanent roof at the time.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
may just provide some clarity. Just for the committee's clarity, the roof for which we are talking about pertaining to separate price number 4 is associated with the existing front portion of the building, which for the most part contains a flat roof, not balance of the facility, which currently has a pitched roof. A report prepared by our consultant detailed items with respect to that existing roof that will require attention, and staff felt it best that as per the recommendations needing attention in the next couple of years, we felt it best that it be included as part of the capital project.
Anytime we get a
I guess
very
that,
large,
Brian, or anybody else who wants to answer, that begs the question. If we go ahead with this, can we try to claim something for these things that need improvement or need repair? Would that be covered under the previous warranty or?
Unfortunately, this wouldn't be covered under the warranty associated with the metal roof. This being a flat product are two separate items.
that's
Go
a
ahead.
very, very logical explanation. I accept that, so I'm on side.
Okay, so everybody agrees that the existing roof replacement stays in.
Yes.
Okay, item number 6, the Johnson Enterprise Management Platform. You have declined next to it. Can you just give us a quick explanation?
Sure. I don't know, Dave, if you want to elaborate on the details of this from Smith and Anderson.
Sure. The base building scope includes a very sophisticated building automation system, sometimes referred to as a building management system or a direct digital control. They all mean the same thing. The mechanical systems are automatically controlled, remotely programmed, and this is a software platform that would, if combined with meters, allow for monitoring and fine tuning of the building systems over the years, but the total cost was $376,000, which would make sense if your building was 1 million square feet, but the anticipated savings of 10% annual of your operating cost, which were estimated to be $300,000. So if you're saving, and there would be some annual maintenance fees associated with this, the savings on an annual basis was determined to be about $10,000. And over the life of your building, you would never recover through reduced operating costs the benefits of this program. So it's really, it was an add-on package that didn't benefit the project, and certainly Brian and the engineering team were on side that this was not of benefit.
Okay, is everybody happy with that explanation and understand? Because we'll have it in the minutes on each of these items, what our actions are.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go along with that recommendation.
Yes,
Okay, and Mary, you're fine?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Now, there's nothing else on a separate price. We move into the alternate pricing, and this is where we really do need the preambles or a bit of an explanation. So I'm going to let Jim or David or Steve, whoever wants to do the preamble and a bit of an explanation. Then when we get to the ones with money, the first one is a decline, so it's just an explanation. When we get to the ones with the money, I'm going to ask them to give us just their gut reaction is whether it should be in there or not, or some reason it should be in there, just so we really understand what we're doing, and then we'll go around the table. The reason I'm doing this is a bit laborious, but this way, when I go to county council on Tuesday, we've explored everything and we all have the questions answered if we need to. So, it just speeds up the process. County council, we promised we would do that. We would, when we came back to them, we'd be all over it and we'd keep them in the loop as much as possible. So I'm going to toss it to Steve probably. If you want to start with the alternate price number one.
Certainly, thank you. Alternative price number one, as you mentioned, has been declined. That was for the provision of a Acrovan handrail system in lieu of the specified wooden diameter and hardwood backer that was specified. So the Acrovan was a premium price. It wasn't an extra, and the decision was previously, or the discussion from our working group meetings was that would be declined in that scenario.
Okay, everybody's okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yep. Okay, so we're okay with that one. You want to move on to the next one?
Alternative price number two is to provide a linear metal soffit to the underside of the balconies. We have 4 locations on between the new addition as well as the existing, where this would be provided in lieu of an exposed precast slab. Dave, if there's more to the architectural selling feature that you want to elaborate on.
Briefly, this gives a more finished look to the underside of the 2 new balconies, which are quite large, and the 2 smaller existing balconies off the second floor dining room. It's primarily an aesthetic recommendation. You would see the planks of the precast when you look up from the ground floor to the underside of the 2 new balconies. And it's also consistent elsewhere in the building. We don't, shall we say, expose the structure in finished spaces. There's a finished soffit typically that provides a finished look. And so this is more for consistency with the existing building. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to switch up the order a little bit, and I'm going to let the warden speak first on this one, then David, and then Mary.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can live with that.
Okay, and David?
Yeah, I want this to be aesthetically pleasing, so certainly we want to be proud of our building.
Okay, and Mary?
I agree with this.
Okay, so that one stays in. And item number 3?
Item number 3 is to complete a cold adhesive application in lieu of a hot applied for the new flat roof assembly on the addition. Reasoning for this is during the application of the hot applied, there is an odor that is present for several weeks during and following the installation of the roof, and that can become a concern for residents and staff for several weeks. So I understand from our previous working group meetings that this is common practice or has been done in previous scenarios for county projects, and that is why it's been left in at this time. So.
Okay, and I'll start with Mary this time. You okay with that?
I think that makes a lot of sense. We don't want to have any problems with the residents, and if there's an odor that, we don't want someone to get sick from that. So I think this one makes sense.
Okay, and Mr. Warden?
Yes, because if the residents are smelling, probably the neighbors are as well, so it's avoiding a problem. Yeah, I'm on side.
Okay, and Dave.
So the question is, will this affect the inside as well as the outside, or just the outside?
It would,
So inside as well as outside?
Yeah, the smell from the hot tar kettle is very pervasive. You'll smell it throughout the building,
Okay,
even
then.
with windows closed.
Okay, I'm in favor of that.
Okay, so that item is approved. And then we have alternate pricing number 4.
yes, alternative price number 4 is the provision of a integral cove base in lieu of a resilient rubber base in some of the resident rooms and vestibules. Again, the discussion during our working group meetings was that's what would be a recommended alternative price.
Okay, and I'll start with David this time. If you have any clarification you need, or if you're okay, that's fine.
Assuming this is wood versus plastic, is that what I'm reading?
No, this is sorry, somebody.
I'll elaborate. The floor material is a sheet vinyl. In lower north, where we have the secure home area, this is a part of the base contract. Residents, unfortunately, as their body functions sometimes don't always work well, and so there's urine that ends up on the floor, and the issue is not a problem if it's in the middle of the floor, but if it's against the wall and you have a rubber base or a wood base, that urine soaks into either the drywall or the concrete underneath the floor, and that urine smell is a problem and a maintenance issue. So it's both eliminating the smell. So what we do is the floor in effect wraps up the wall by 4 inches, and then the top of that gets sealed to the drywall, all but eliminating the potential for urine to be soaked into the drywall or the concrete slab underneath. So it both improves the indoor air quality environment as well as eliminates a operating or maintenance issue over the life of the project.
Okay, well, thank you for the explanation. I'm certainly in favor of that.
Okay, and Mary?
I'm in favor of that, and it'll make it easier for when the cleaning staff is in there as well. So it's a good idea.
And Mr. Warden.
Yeah, sounds like good investment. I'm on side.
And then we get into some other alternate pricing. And Steve, if you want to lead the preambles or the explanations, and do the same thing with the committee members.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I might defer to Dave again on these, as I know he's been in contact with Smith and Anderson on a couple that were recently added. So,
thank you, Steve. Item M1 is an Armstrong Brain digital mixing valve. This is what provides tempered hot water for residents so that the temperature of the water doesn't exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is the best product on the market for to ensure that that temperature is delivered at a very consistent temperature. The ministry requires daily monitoring, but even with daily monitoring, other devices have both less certainty around consistent temperature, and they also have more frequent maintenance and repair issues. So for the nominal cost increase, it really is both a resident safety primarily, but also operational savings.
Okay, Mary, are you okay with this one?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I've worked in a retirement home, and he's right. We had to take temperature tests every day, at least once a day, if not twice. Plus, the big thing here is the fact that we don't want any of our residents to be burned. So I think it's good. I agree with this.
Okay, and David?
Yeah, I think it's a very good investment for what you get.
Okay, and Mr. Warden?
Yes.
Okay, and then the next one is a decline, but we should have an explanation so we can support it.
Certainly. There was a request to get a price for instantaneous hot water on-demand heating. And the thought was that it might result in a lower cost than having large hot water heating tanks and holding tanks, but that wasn't the case. And so the working group determined that the design as presently was the way to go, and that there wasn't a benefit from an energy savings perspective that would pay back the cost premium, which was about just under $19,000.
Okay, so everybody should be okay with that explanation, I would think.
Yes.
And then we have two more to do. We have M3 and M4. Do M3 first, please.
Yes, M3 is the existing part of your home has the building. This relates to the Johnson Controls building automation system. The controllers, which are, shall we say, the brains where individual control points are routed through, are nearing the end of their service life, and this is a 3-year project. There might be up to 5 years service life in them, and if budget was an issue, we could have gambled and left them in place. But we felt that the time to replace them, even though they're not in resident areas, these are all in service spaces, but the time to replace them is when the trades are on site. And so M3 and M4 are really the same. M3 is controllers that are sorry, that are located throughout the building, and M4 is the main brain that controls the entire building. And so this is replacing existing the devices that are near the end of their service life.
Okay, I'm going to go around the table. I'll start with the warden. You want to leave that in?
Yes.
Hey, Dave
Yes, I'm in favor.
and Mary.
Yes.
Okay, so that one's in, and finally the M4.
M4 is the main controller for the entire building, and it's really the same logic. It's in a service space. It's nearing the end of its service life, and that the logical time when budget allows is to make the replacement now.
Okay. Any objections to that one?
No, makes perfect sense to me.
Hey, does that cover all of the items that you needed direction from us on?
From the consultant's perspective, yes.
Okay,
And then what's left, Mr. Chair, would then be if there's any questions related to the soft costs. We have the $5 million of soft costs with the FF&E. And Al Taylor put together a list on the FF&E. If there's any questions, he could address those for us.
Okay, if you want to lead us through that and just make sure that we're all comfortable with that in there.
Sure.
Certainly.
You want to stop sharing, Steve?
Yeah.
There we go. Do you have it to pop up, Al, or would you like me to do that?
I'm just trying to find it, Jim. If you've got it handy, please do.
Okay. 1 second.
Just so everybody knows, I am trying to follow the agenda, but I think we're doing it in a logical, we're picking off all the pieces that need our direction on, or basically our approval. So if I miss anything on the agenda, they'll pull me back to that before we get down to item 6.0.
There we go. All right, go ahead, Al.
Let's see. The first 4 items are predominantly your information technology items. We've had a number of questions with Al Ritzma and Jeremy and some of the county's IT team, and identified the, all the items that they would need to provide. The construction contract provides some of the infrastructure to go with this, but this is going to be for antennas and all the different devices, cabling, and some of the phones for staff phones. So the county IT team was going to verify some of the numbers that we have in there. Meeting that we had earlier this week, they were comfortable with the numbers that were provided based on their experience from similar installations.
Okay, just for the members of county council, if there's a particular item on here you'd like clarified or want to talk about more, that's fine. Or if there's something you think might be missing, by all means, speak up. But again, this is an area where we have to rely on the expertise of our staff and our consultants, et cetera. So I'm just going to throw it open to any one of the members of the committee from county council.
Bob, when I see IT equipment, 400,000, can that be broken down into a little more detail? What do we get for 400,000, and is that an actual fact, or if we had, you know, it is a large item?
Yeah, this is still early in the project phase for this. So what we can do is, if you're comfortable with leaving it as a budget item, as we develop details, we can bring those back to the steering committee with the breakdown.
Yeah, on an item like that, what I'd ask is that our minutes reflect that that will be brought back to us before it gets spent.
Yep, no issues
Is
with
that fair? Everybody will be comfortable with that? And they'll tell us when they're ready to come back and just explain it further to us. Okay, any other items like that? Okay, I just want everybody to know that that was all embedded in there. And that way, you know, if I get asked questions and I forget the answer on Tuesday, I've got some backup that can clarify it for me on top of the staff. Greatly appreciated.
Bob,
Yep.
before we leave that, cabling, 50, what do you mean cabling? Excuse me, ignorance.
So this would be all the Ethernet cabling that runs throughout the building to the various security systems, controllers, telephones, computers.
And resident rooms as well for cable, internet connections for residents as well.
There's a lot of money there in those first 5 items, so I'd really like the pencil sharp on them.
Yeah, as I said, these are preliminary estimates that we used. David Hines helped us with some figures that, in terms of budgetary figures that he's had from other construction projects, in terms of the size of the building, what was spent there. So those are what we're using as budget estimates. Now that the building design is complete, we can start working on the details behind the IT infrastructure that supports it. And as I said, we'll bring those costs back.
Okay, so all of these things are to some degree best guesstimates at the moment, but as they get refined, you'll get the explanations at this level, at committee level. Okay,
Yes, that's correct.
that good
A
with
lot of the
everybody?
numbers were, sorry, Bob.
I just want to make sure that's good with the members of county council.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm fine, Bob. I mean, I've got Jim's summary, and what I'm looking at is it's not really discretionary. It's something that has to be done.
Okay, I'll throw it back to Jim or whoever else wants to lead us through the rest of this.
Yeah, I can continue on.
Kind of identified things that were required for the building, things that were identified for the resident, and items for nursing. So the first chunk of items were more building requirements. We have interior signage, so that would be room numbers, room identifiers, nameplates for the residents, a directory board, and that's about it for those. So it's how you get through around the building and be able to find out where everything is. Let's see, the evacuation markers, or if the building ever you would need to evacuate the building as staff go through and check rooms. When they close the doors, the markers get set in place. So if a door's open, they would fall down and people would know that there's a potential that somebody could be inside that room. So when the last sweep through during evacuation would be just to make sure that all the markers were in place. Menu boards that number was developed from a fairly recent project that was done in the area, that whatever those numbers were from a similar project. The adult change table is a requirement to have one in the accessible washroom. The water guard is already in place, and we haven't explored if anything else to be expanded on and added to. Washroom accessories is just, we have toilet paper holders, but soap and paper towel dispensers would be part of the county's requirement to supply those. The contractor has it in their scope to install. We've done window coverings for the resident rooms, and we didn't look at any of the existing staff in public areas of the home except for the chapel because the amount of windows that are in there. So we identified $20,000 for that room. And the same with the lounge and so
Lounge
those are
program and
two.
activity spaces.
Pardon me?
Lounge program and activity rooms.
The activity areas, yes. We have miscellaneous metal shelving, so that would be in janitor's closets, some storage rooms. And those are throughout the home areas. Moving cost allowance was a number that's been around for, I guess, a year or so, or maybe longer. So it was something that we've carried forward. Building permit was the actual cost permit that we now have.
Has there been any indication the municipality wants to waive that for us?
No, we had to hire extra staff just to accommodate the Terrace Lodge Redevelopment, so sorry.
It's worth asking. Thank you. Go ahead, Alan.
Thank you. The last four items, MMMC and the county and myself did a condition assessment for the exterior of the building, and there were a number of failed glazed units. There's some concrete repairs which we were able to get into the construction contract, and there's some damage at the entrance canopy with where some of the buses are dropping off residents, visitors that are banging into the entry. So we've just allowed some money for each one of those items to look at as we get into the project and come up with designs and what would be required to update those if required.
Okay, so this is more for our information at this stage, and it'll get refined as we go along, but we're trying not to miss any items. Under the resident part, that's all pretty self-explanatory. If there's a particular item anybody wants explained right now, that's fine. But again, these are just pretty straightforward things that you have to do whenever you're doing this type of a project, and this are the things that directly impact our residents. And I know that the members of the committee, especially from county council, don't want to cut any corners if we can, unless we're forced to. So I'm happy to leave it that way unless a member of county council wants to clarify something further. Again, the stuff will get refined as it actually happens.
No, I'm good, Bob.
Are you okay, Mary?
Yep, I'm okay, Bob.
And Mr. Warden?
For sure.
Okay, so we'll just kind of skip through that if that's okay. And move on to the next item.
So then, if the committee is comfortable with the costs involved, and then the next point would be the discussion around the funding available and the amount of funding, if any, to be returned that isn't required for council to consider for other purposes.
Okay, and this is what I alluded to at the very beginning is we'll bring a report to county council that gives them $1.4 million to go back into our budget. It's going to be up to county council and the budget committee what they do with that $1.4 million, whether they reduce taxes or there's a need somewhere else in the county. That's all up to them. But that's what our report will say. We will put in not all the nitty-gritty details that you're going through today, but we'll put in all the high-level numbers. There'll be full disclosure to county council on Tuesday. I don't think I'm going to get any pushback from the members of county council, but is that process all right with each of you, starting with the warden?
Absolutely.
Okay, and Dave?
Well, my opinion is I've never done a renovation where at some point in time you decided, oh, we should have done this. We didn't budget for it. I would like to see that just kept in reserve in case something comes up that we can draw on.
Okay, I can probably explain. I challenged a little bit earlier before the meeting on the 1.4 million. But we do have 60% of what we're anticipating from the province coming. And we're pretty sure we're going to get that. Plus, we have built in some contingency factors. All of the folks that are involved doing the pricing and running the numbers and that are very comfortable that we can go back and put this back into the county system at this time and not run the risk of any nasty surprises or running out of funds to do the job properly. Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that sums it up well. There's 2.4 million potentially available, and we're only including less than $1 million of that. So there's still another 1.4 that could be coming in that could be then used as reserves. And as the chair has said, there are contingencies included in the pricing that you saw above, both in the D grant numbers as well as in the additional pricing, the soft costs. There's another 350,000 even in the soft costs that we included out of the 5.6 million in soft costs. So there are a number of contingencies, plus I think the big one being the potential contingency coming in through the development grant.
Okay, if Jim's comfortable, there's enough padding that will accommodate any future surprises. I'm willing to concede.
Okay, and Mary?
I agree with the approach that you mentioned.
And yeah, you're okay, Mr. Warden, I know that. All right, so we'll do that report up, and when it gets presented, we're not giving away something prematurely and then having to go back and ask for it again, which would be a worst case scenario for us. So I'm comfortable after doing what Dave just did, kind of challenging it. And whether it was premature to give it back right now, but it works nice with our budget cycle for this year. Okay. I
So
see
then, Mr.
Julie's
Chair,
nodding,
there'd
so
be
staff are
perhaps
okay with that approach.
perhaps it would be time then for the first motion, which, and it's just the number, I put down the wrong number in the report I sent out this morning. I included the HST. So the motion would read that the Terrace Lodge Redevelopment Steering Committee recommend a project budget of 35,311,212 exclusive of HST.
So moved.
I'm sorry, I read the wrong number again. Sorry, it's 34,700,483. Excuse me.
Okay. As amended, so moved.
Happy to second.
And you'll be pleased to know that's the number we have in the report I'm going to do Tuesday. So we've got it right, Jim. Thank you. Just hold your hands up for a second. That's all, Carrie. Okay, done.
Then, Mr.
Okay,
Chair, next on the agenda would be the letter that we would need to issue. The CAO and warden would need to sign and issue to D Grant for the acceptance of the cost on the stipulated price contract.
Okay, the letter is properly worded, but I'll paraphrase it in crayon the way I like things. Basically, this letter lets them go ahead and we can get moving with the construction or get people on site right at the beginning of February. We still haven't got all the I's dotted and T's crossed with the province. But I'm not concerned that they're going to pull the plug on us at any time. So that's what that letter will do. It will basically hold Julie and the warden harmless as we charge forward and everybody else that we're doing this consciously. That's all. Okay. Do you want to do a motion on that one?
Yes, please. So the motion is, let me just read it here. Give me a second. That the CAO and warden be authorized to sign an acceptance of cost letter to D Grant for a stipulated price contract.
I'll move it, Bob.
I'll second.
Okay, Dave, did you have any comments before we do this? Or I'm sorry, Mr. Warden.
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay, the vote then, we'll call it, just throw up your hands and you're in favor. That one's carried too, Jim.
Okay, and then just for administrative purposes, that the January 22nd report titled Terrace Lodge Redevelopment Project Budget be received and filed for information.
Okay, we need a mover and seconder.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor? Okay, and that one's carried too. Does that pretty much cover it till we get down to 6.0?
I think next we're on 4.1 for the construction schedule.
Okay, go ahead.
Daryl, if you could give a brief overview of what people should anticipate starting in the week of February 8th.
Okay, leading up to that, we'll have a pre-construction meeting, but ultimately, based on the issuance of the letter of intent to D Grant that we may proceed with construction, we would prepare within about 2 weeks of that letter, which we're anticipating to mobilize to site week of February the 8th, and at which time we would prepare ultimately an extension of a construction access road, site fence, as well as construction site trailer, and basically prepare. I wouldn't anticipate that we would start stripping site ultimately and proceeding with foundation work until certainly the latter part of February, as we've got a series of shop drawings and things like that would need to be submitted and reviewed by the consultant team before fabrication and delivery of such materials can occur. So that's a high level synopsis of us beginning on site in February.
Any questions or clarifications required?
Well, it'll be a welcome sight. The residents and the staff have been looking forward to this for about 5 years. So,
Okay, Jim, if you want to move on to item number 5.
So just to again clarify what both this committee and council has previously agreed to is that we are proceeding in advance of getting approval from the ministry. So the more formal way would be is that we would sit here in a holding pattern for a number of months, wait for the ministry to approve all the pricing and the design, and then we would kick off sometime later in the spring. But we're very confident in the work that we've done, and that there's minimal risk in proceeding at this time, so that we can get an early start and get things rolling.
Okay, and anything else under that title?
And then part of what we'll be doing going forward is we'll be working with the ministry to get all of the various subtrade packages into them for approval. And so we'll be letting council and the committee know then at a later date when all of that is approved.
Okay, so we won't be charging on blindly without them well aware of what's going on. It's just that they have a process that they have to follow, and it takes them some churning to do that. So we're doing it simultaneously as opposed to sitting back and waiting for each one to do their thing. That fair to say?
Yes, it is.
Okay to move down to item number 6.
Yes.
Okay, the sod turning, you're aware that we did sort of a launch out in the cold and whatnot, but I think it served its purpose, and that really was more than anything else to remind people that it's real, and more importantly, to allow the local Terrace Lodge fundraising committee to get to work full time and start to raise some funds for all the various projects or all the items that they have on the auction block, and get that rolling. We do eventually want to try and get the Premier involved, the Minister of Health, and Jeff Urich, and of course Karen from a federal perspective, even though she's not actively involved there. But we do want to celebrate all of the county homes and the way we run things and have for many years. We also really want to celebrate the $19-20 million being invested by the province. COVID-19 has thrown a wrinkle into it, and nursing homes or long-term care facilities per se have become a bit of a dirty word. So there's a lot of, not obstacles, but there's a lot of considerations around trying to pull something like this together. There is no urgency on time. I'm going to be meeting on Monday with the Minister of Long-Term Care. I will be bringing up the 2 stumbling blocks that we have in the county with regards to running our homes. One being the prioritizing of the lists of people that go in. There should be some sort of a waiting for local residents who pay into it, particularly since we dump $5 to $6 million a year annually in out of our money separately and above whatever funding is available. And the second thing is that whole funding envelope. We have the best university study or consultant study they could ever do. We got 45 or 50 years of funding the thing properly and running it properly. And we know for 3 homes and the number of beds that we have that it costs you $5 or $6 million to do it right. So those 2 stumbling blocks will be brought up again with the ministry. We want to have that ministry involved. I've been talking through Jeff's office and through their office. You know how these things go in the minister in the Premier's office. We may end up putting something virtual together, some sort of a recorded event that we can share on YouTube's and everywhere else, or Facebooks and all that kind of stuff, where the Premier participates, the ministers participate, and we get the message out. I think we have a lot to celebrate. I think we're going to have obstacles for the whole rest of this year trying to do any physical gatherings, no matter what they say about vaccines and everything else. It's not going to happen as quick as we would like it to happen, because you can't get to the herd immunity till you get to 80 or 85% of the population inoculated, and boy, you know how that's going. So it's going to be tough, hard slugging for the rest of this year that way. So I've Julie's on notice, and the warden's on notice, and Michelle's on notice, but we got nothing concrete to come back, and I don't want our staff spending any time on this until we flesh out some of the ideas on how it could work or what we should be doing, and availability of the prime minister or the premier and the various ministers. So if you folks are willing to kind of leave me stumbling around in the wilderness with that, I'll put in the time and the effort. And when we have something concrete to work on, Julie's already agreed that she'll make me look semi-professional again and make us all proud, which she does all the time. And I know that will happen with Michelle and Julie and whatnot, but I don't want them wasting any time doing this, beating the bushes and whatnot. Is everybody okay with us going ahead on that basis?
Yeah, that's fine, Bob. It'd be much nicer to do it in July or August than in February, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And even if this gets pushed into 2022, when we can physically get together, if that's the decision that gets made, that's the decision gets made. I'm kind of at the mercy of the guests who are coming. But if we're going to do something this year, I think we're going to end up going down this virtual path. So, I haven't firmed any of that stuff up, but we got lots of talk going on, and there is a desire to help us and a desire to come down and celebrate. Just timing is always a problem, and how is a problem, and plus we're throwing in their face the two big issues that we have. So, that's not contingent about them coming down to celebrate, but it might change the tone if they're in a better position to announce better funding for all homes. Maybe this is a good place to do that announcement and show how it can be done right. So does that all make sense to you folks?
That's good.
I'm on side.
You okay with that, Julie? Okay, so we'll keep stumbling along with that. Anything else we need to add before we talk about the next meeting?
No.
Doesn't sound like it. Thank you, folks, for being so well prepared and answering the questions. That we can scoot through these things relatively quickly, which is always my preference, personally. As far as the next meeting goes, we're going to leave that again at the call of the working committee. They will bring us in when there's something significant to report to county council, or there is something that they need direction on, like we did today. And then we'll go through the list and we'll give them direction. Yes, no, maybe, or conditional. So we'll do that. It'll just be at their call. We have had some comments on county council and some discussion around committee and the amount of work that can cause for people. This is a high priority item, but I'm trying, and I know every member of this committee is, to stay the hell out of the way until we're needed, and then come in and do what we're asked to do, or question when we need to question. I guarantee if something starts to go sideways, you will be the first to know, and we will get together. But for the most part, we're leaving this in the hands of all of the folks that are really going to make it happen now. We're into implementation execution, and they don't need a bunch of other uneducated bosses in the way. And so we're going to kind of stay out of the way. I have given full authority to Jim and Julie that if we're getting in the way in any way, shape, or form, or we're causing any extra work in any way, shape, or form, to let us know. I've pulled the plug on committees I've been on county council before, and I'll do it on this one if we have to. But I don't think we have to. I would prefer that we end up being the example on how to run committees and how to have the interaction with the implementators and the executors versus a lot of churning. Anybody want to add anything to that before we retire and go off, and hope they call us again sometime because it's fun to be involved. Everybody okay?
Good.
Hey, nothing else, Jim? We can retire.
That's correct.
We need a motion to adjourn or anything like that. Oh, well, Julie's nodding. Tom's got his hand up first, and Dave's second. And all in favor? We just adjourned it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Stay
Have a
safe.
great weekend.